hindi naman pwede na detached ka sa mga stories lagi, di ba? The more na may puso yung pagkikwento mo, the more na nuanced din yung pagtingin mo dun sa issue na you really have to capture the heart of this story. That's how you affect people's opinion. That's how you affect your viewers. Na hindi ka lang nag-i-inform, di ba? You have to move people to action. You have to move people to do something.
We talk to people who turn their life's passion into an advocacy. And we start conversations with those who advocate for a cause. This is Speaking Of.
Hi everyone, welcome to Speaking Of. I'm Charles Ladia, and for this semester, Speaking Of shares stories of passion and advocacy that aim to encourage and inspire everyone in spite of everything that's happening around us. So our guest for this episode is a multi-platform news reporter for ABS-CBN Integrated News and Current Affairs, a communication instructor like me, and a podcast creator as well for the Bachelor's podcast. So please welcome to Speaking Of, Mr. Jervis Manahan. Hi, Jervis.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
I'm doing great. Sana ikaw din, you're doing great. Yes, so for this episode, pag-uusapan namin ni Jervis on what it means to be a broadcast journalist in this very different and difficult times, diba? At pag-uusapan rin natin ang kanyang passion and advocacy in delivering these news every single day. Pero pag-usapan muna natin, Jervis, no, you are a broadcast journalist, you're also a podcast creator, you're also a communication instructor. Ang dami niyan, diba? Parang very millennial na you do a lot of things. So how do you balance and how do you find time, lalo na ngayong pandemic, in doing all of these things together?
Well, yeah, as you have said, it's a millennial thing that we don't settle for just one job. I think ever since hindi ako nakontento talaga na isa lang yung ginagawa ko, I have to be doing a lot of things. I have to be maximizing my time here on Earth. Diba? So, sa akin, mahalaga na you have multiple careers. So economically then, it helps you have various sources of income. Of course, yung broadcast journalism part, it takes the bulk of my time kasi that's my full-time job, my bread and butter. And this type of work will not just ask you to work for like 8 hours a day. Of course, it's much more than that. But yun, I still managed to squeeze in 6 units, teaching 6 units of classes at Trinity University of Asia. Kasi dati, di ba, pre-pandemic, I make it a point na active yung social life ko pa din.
Yes.
I'm very outgoing person.
And you travel a lot, nakita ko.
Yeah, I travel a lot. But since a lot of activities ay nawala nung nagka-pandemic na, that's when we gave birth to this podcast with my friends. So parang all the time that we have spent partying or going to islands or hiking, we devoted into a podcast.
Interesting pala yun, no? Na parang instead of going out nga, you focus the energy dito sa podcast na ito. Tapos you also teach and you also do broadcast journalism. Tapos balik lang tayo and let's now focus on being a broadcast journalist, which is the chunk of this podcast. Pero ikaw, bakit ka nag-broadcast communication sa UP?
Well, actually, it's a very, very long story. But siguro I'd like to say na this has been a childhood dream for me. No, napakahaba nung roots niya. But siguro the earliest memories was, or the earliest memory that I've had was since I was a child, I really wanted to be part of historical events. Like, pinaka-naalala ko noon, nung batang-bata pa ako nito, when then former President Joseph Estrada was sworn in as president. It happened in Baraswain Church, which was just a town away from us. Sa Kalumpit, Bulacan kasi ako noon. And I remember I really wanted to ask my mom na pumunta tayo doon. I want to see historical events happening. So hanggang sa, ang daming early memories of the news. Sa akin we were watching the news with my family. Pinaka-naalala ko nung bata pa ako was nung namatay si Pope John Paul II. I was watching it the entire coverage of it, and I was envying all the broadcast journalists who were in Vatican at that time. Tapos, madami pang iba na mga tinutuan ko like 9/11. Tapos parang I'm seeing, mga reporter na nandun mismo sa site. And somehow, I've had that inherent curiosity to be in big events. So until nung nag-high school ako, our family moved to Dubai, United Arab Emirates. And we didn't have social media at that time, di ba? So parang TV lang, TFC lang. So, yung balita nun, wala pang mga smartphones nun. So, nanonood lang kami ng TV and then we would see reporters going to wars or going to typhoons. And then I remember like saying it to myself lang na I really, really want to do what they're doing. So parang gusto ko na gawin yung ginagawa nila. And specifically to ABS, because ABS-CBN was the only channel accessible to us at that time. So as sa TFC subscribers kami noon, wala namang GMA sa Middle East during that time. So it was a very specific dream that I've had na maging reporter ng ABS-CBN News. So, yun. Tapos, nung high school ako, may Filipino magazine sa Dubai, Filipino community magazine in Dubai where I got to contribute. Actually, when I started in UP, I was a journalism major. I just shifted after a few semesters. So, ayun. So, doon nagsimula sa
affinity mo with historical events.
With news, watching the news on TV, affinity on historical events, and just being there to cover like big events. So, yun, it has been a North Star for me.
So talagang, kung masasabi natin na ngayon, you are fulfilling the childhood dream.
Yeah. Siguro, madaming beses ko na pinagpasalamat ko na I am where I wanted to be in the past, di ba?
Now, pumunta tayo sa UP kasi ang Broadcom din ang isa sa mga highly sought after courses sa University of the Philippines, no? At luckily, sabi mo nga, your dream has now become a reality ng paunti-unti nung pumasok ka sa University of the Philippines. What memories and UPCMC are still with you right now? Ano yung pinaka-vivid memory mo ng pagiging isang Broadcom student sa CMC?
Well, a lot. Sobrang dami. I mean, everything. Parang naalala ko karamihan ng mga projects na ginawa ko in Broadcom noon. From the time that I shifted out, kasi I found the journalism program more, yung platform is print. But I really wanted to do more television and radio work, so that's why I shifted. From the major subjects hanggang sa mga highly specialized subjects namin, naalala ko lahat. But particularly, there is one broadcast journalist, si Mean Los Baños of TV5, who was also teaching. Actually, she taught us. She is my greatest mentor sa UP noon, and she's still teaching in UP up until now. She asked us to do what a broadcast journalist would do. So, crime stories, kahit gabi, lumalabas kami para mag-cover as students at that time. I'd say that Broadcom really has prepared us for this kind of life. Although not entirely. Of course, there are so many things that I've had to learn in the industry na. No? But I think as a broadcast student kasi, di ba, the entire curriculum, you have a lot of theories, a lot of practice, a lot of productions. Siguro mas nag-lean ako dun sa production side than the theory side of it. But of course, di ba naman matatakasan yung lahat? I think naging professor ko lahat ng teachers doon. And in 2016, I went back as a media studies major in broadcast. So, yeah, I really love our department so much.
How does it feel, Jervis, no, na yung mga professors mo before who were also practitioners are now your colleagues?
Oh, alam mo, medyo interesting yan. Kasi like si Miss Mean talaga. No, syempre we used to call her ma'am. Si Ma'am Mean dati. Tapos nung nakakasabay ko siya sa coverage, ayaw na niya magpapatawag ng ma'am. So dapat first name basis na lang. And that was so
hirap nun.
Parang, I cannot call you Mean. I have to call you Ma'am Miss Mean kasi of course teacher mo pa din yun, no? Kahit na nakakasabay ko na. But ayun, madalas ko siyang nakakasabay lalo na nagko-cover pa ako sa legislative na government before. So, yun, nakita kami nung Bagyong Rolly sa dito sa, what's this village in Marikina na laging binabaha?
Provident.
Sa Provident. Yeah, so, yun, madaming beses. So far, siya lang naman yung broadcast journalist sa department.
Tapos,
But,
how does it feel now that ikaw na ngayon yung nagtuturo sa mga aspiring broadcast journalists din?
yeah, I felt like somehow things have gone full circle. Like when I first taught TV production to my students, parang, alam mo yung realization na, parang, matanda ko na kasi parang dati-dati lang kami yung nakaupo doon sa chairs, sa studio chairs. Tapos, ngayon, ako na yung nag-handle sa kanila. I'm sad lang na we cannot do much of it now because we're online learning. But hopefully, I'm really looking forward to coming back
Yes.
to face-to-face classes. And of course, syempre, I wouldn't deny naman na one of my dreams then once I finish my MA is to teach in UP eventually. But Trinity has been so welcoming so far. And I mean, I've had a good time like expanding my horizons in this field. Like having a different academic environment also taught me a lot of things.
Yes. What is one lesson that you've learned in CMC, in UPCMC, that you're now teaching sa mga students mo sa Trinity?
Well, most of the things that I'm teaching in Trinity are, combination of what I've learned in UP and what I learned in the industry as well. So all of the skills needed. But siguro, the first thing that I learned in UP Masscom, and it's also the first thing that I always teach to my students in every semester, is that truth is not objective. Like there's no objectivity. That's one of the biggest misconceptions of students going to communication tracks, that the truth is objective. Like truth is there's no place for such subjectivity in it. Like bias and all these topics, like I always put it straight. Like kahit anong subject ang turo ko, like I've been teaching for 5 semesters now, I always make it a point na this is the first thing that we have to learn. Like what are the things that you have to unlearn first before we proceed? So mga ganun.
Yes, and broadcast journalists really have that influence, no, on shaping the truth that the public will hear and will listen to. Tapos, Jervis, syempre, research din kita, pinag-aralan ko rin yung mga napagdaanan mo. Yes. So, interestingly, no, you started with PTV4, tama ba? And then, you
actually, GMA first.
GMA.
GMA, but off-cam roles lahat. So,
Okay.
I was a researcher, I was a segment producer, I was a news writer, up until I was an associate producer for 3.5 years before I jumped to PTV, where I've had my first on-cam job. So, 2 years sa PTV before I shifted to ABS-CBN.
Tapos, Jervis, diba, very competitive ang broadcast journalism industry. No, syempre kailangan you thrive sa pagkuha pa lang ng news every day, no? What were the skills necessary, do you think, so that in order for you to survive in that very competitive industry, na kailangan every day, 'di ba, may deliverable ka, kailangan every day you compete, you ano tawag dito, you find the news that will be aired the night of that day as well.
Well, there are 2 streams kasi of the skills Like the first one, and I think the more important part that you have to learn while you are in school is the editorial judgment. Like how, as a person, do you determine which is newsworthy versus those which are not newsworthy? Which is bigger? Ano mas malaking storya? Ano hindi? Like, and if I send you to a coverage na ang dami-daming nangyayari, where do you focus on? Diba? Napakahalaga nun to shape and sharpen your editorial judgment as a person. And not many people have that. So it takes years of training for you to shape that. Like, paano mo malalaman kung alin ang kabali-balita? Or alin sa isang mahabang presko ni Duterte ang dapat ibalita? But also, on the other hand, you have the technical skills. You have to have writing skills. You have to have good writing skills. You should have a good network of contacts. and ability to reach people, chase after interviews, time management, of course. How do you manage your time to make it on air, because broadcast journalism is very
Yes.
on time up to the last second.
Every second counts.
Yeah, and of course, nandun din yung on-cam presence, di ba? Like, hindi naman pwede na mukha kang hindi ka credible tingnan. So,
Habang nakatayo ka, di ba, sa chair?
The presentation skills are always there, di ba? But presentation might be secondary na lang. I think it's always the writing part, the gathering part, how you ask questions, how you contact people. It's more important. Like the off-cam part of it, it's really the bulk of it. And maybe delivering it in front of a camera would just be like cherry on top.
Mm-hmm.
So yun, madaming skills na kailangan, and some reporters may strengths, like some would be better in writing, some would be better in presentation, some would be better in getting scoops, some would be better in asking questions. And of course, our aspiration is to be the best in all aspects.
Yes. Jervis, ikaw sa tingin mo, which skill are you best in?
Siguro ako, I'm really focusing on the writing aspect, because if you write well, everything else would follow. And you cannot be a good broadcast journalist if you do not write, if you do not write well. So, and it also requires flexibility, because right now, as a broadcast journalist, the demands are not just for radio and television. You're breaking news on Twitter, you're breaking news on social media,
yes,
on digital platforms, diba? So there has to be a multidisciplinary approach to broadcast, not just the back in those times, if you're a TV reporter, you're just a TV reporter. Now you will be asked to report on TV, radio, online, and all those platforms. Yes. So how do you adapt to that? So parang the digital and multimedia skills also count.
Grabe yung, ako parang ngayon palang pinapakinggan kita on the work that you do, no? Grabe yung commitment, no? From choosing the news, to writing, to delivering, to posting on different social media pages na, oo nga, no? Task nyo rin yun, kasi usually the network is just retweeting you or copying the tweets or the messages that you are sending. Tapos ngayon, Jervis, pre-pandemic, because syempre pre-pandemic, nagkaroon ka na experiences with PTV, GMA, and ABS. And when you were younger, you said that you really wanted to become a part of these historical events. Pre-pandemic, which events or which is one event that you covered that remained the most historical or the most memorable for you?
I think it's still the Marawi Siege as a PTV reporter. I was sent there on the day 8 of the siege. So that was the first time that I heard bombs exploding from a distance. Also the first time that I heard, non-stop bullets, coming from everywhere. Yeah, but siguro yung huling coverage ko doon sa Marawi was the 100th day of the siege. Bandang August na yon, August of 2017. And that was the first time that media were all allowed to enter the main battle area legitimately. I was still in PTV at that time, and I think that was the scariest, because we've had to cross a bridge on foot with bombs exploding on both sides. So, sobrang natakot talaga ako doon. I felt that it was a risk, but I kept that story and I kept on playing it to my students. So parang this is something na I've done. But madami pang iba, but siguro on top of mind, it will always be the Marawi Siege so far.
Sabi ko sa iyo kanina, no, na when I wake up every morning, kapag pina-follow niyo po si Jervis sa Twitter at Jervis Manahan, when you wake up every morning, may news ka na agad ng 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m. Can we go through very quickly to your daily routine as a broadcast journalist? Gising ka ba ng anong oras at anong oras natatapos yung araw?
Oh, well, kasi sa isang 24 hours na news organization like ABS-CBN, you would always have reporters on duty at any given time. So we are divided into batches. There are the early morning batch, there's the morning batch, there's the afternoon batch, and the overnight. So kami yung overnight batch. So we are a team of 5 reporters who are on duty starting 10 in the evening. Tapos ongoing yun buong gabi. And then whatever you gather at night, you would have to report on the early morning newscasts. So before ABS-CBN was shut down, we've had Umagang Kay Ganda, and that was my main platform. I always reported in Umagang Kay Ganda before. So when we were shut down, UKG was shelved, and then we had to report on teleradyo shows, ANC shows, and all the morning newscasts. So sometimes we would be asked, siguro ang standard would be 6 a.m., 7 a.m., 8 a.m. newscast. Sometimes up until 9 a.m. But siguro standard 6, 7, 8 a.m. na newscast, we would report there. In social media, anytime naman yun. May break anytime. So yun, after that, after the newscasts, then you go home. That's when you go home. So it's not an on-call type of job. Although, of course, there would be times that you would be called na hindi mo
Emergency.
bagyo. Like, pag may bagyo, i-deploy ka sa out of town. Tatawagan ka talaga. But on a normal, everyday basis, we work in different shifts. So yun, at we work then with regular day off. So, hindi rin naman kami 24/7. So, tutulog din naman kami.
To give you some challenge naman dito sa podcast na ito, Jervis, ay sabi ko nga kanina, I scrolled throughout your Twitter para din makita ko yung ginagawa mo in the past year because of the pandemic. Medyo quiz type ito So,
Okay.
tell me what is happening in this photo that you posted. Tapos, I'll ask you several questions. Parang these are, for me din the 3 most memorable photos that you posted. Okay. Let's start with...
Oh yeah, this is very recent. I remember that.
Yes.
That was the time when we commemorated. This is not actually a coverage. This is the time when we commemorated the first year since the regional stations of ABS-CBN was shut down. So this is a project by the National Union of Journalists of the Philippines. So kasi I'm also an officer of NBJP ABS-CBN. So we went there to support the project. It was led by NUJP. So we did this in front of ABS-CBN as a memorial to all the networks, our regional networks that shut down because of the franchise denial.
From, di ba, parang ang haba din ng struggle ng ABS-CBN franchise, no? From May, well, earlier than May 2020, pero parang May, June, July, and this was August of last year, no? Take me to that moment. What was going on in your mind when the franchise was not going to be extended?
Actually, when I joined ABS-CBN, there were already talks na the franchise was in danger, ganyan. And then, for all the years that I've stayed in ABS-CBN, there would always be that hushes, like talks na, may bago na namang sinabi Pangulo against us. May takot na naman yung mga empleyado, all that. But I remember, before the first shutdown happened, diba, we were assured of, madaming mga politicians na nagsabi na hindi naman mangyayari yan, hindi masya-shutdown yan. So I remember that May 5, that was the very dark day that screens went black. Kakabalik lang yun ng UKG because UKG paused for a while nung nag-start ng quarantine. And parang pangalawang araw pa lang noon na nakabalik kami on air after the quarantine break. Tapos it happened on an afternoon. I was asleep at home. I was preparing for my duty that night until I was awakened by a call from a friend. Parang it was a very worrying call. Shut down tayo tonight. So, yeah, when I tuned in sa television and then I checked my phone and all of the work threads are talagang flooded with so many messages worrying about this. Ang dami-dami talaga. Like, I cannot catch up with so many messages. That's when we realized that, oh my God, this is our last day on free television. Ang dami pa ibang nangyayari nun. But kinagabihan, pumasok pa din kami. Like, we went to work after that, just a few hours after the shutdown. Like, pretended like nothing happened because TV Plus was still operating at that time. Diba? So nagkaroon pa na second shutdown sa TV Plus noong June 30 up until noong July 10 na yun na yung after so many hearings yun na nga yung time na deny na yung franchise renewal. At that time na we were rallying pa. We were in Congress, may caravan, and then we participated there. And we went back to ABS-CBN to wait for that verdict. And then, all employees, almost a lot of employees nasa loob ng office noon, waiting just for the fate. We were just tuned into one television screen. And then when it was announced, so many people were crying. It was personally one of the saddest moments that we've had. I mean, saddest memory namin noon. Kasi the future was uncertain at that time.
Yes.
We didn't know who would be going, who would be terminated, who would be retrenched, diba? Our future was on the line at that time. So, yun. But we just carried on. And, well, I'm not very glad to be one of the people who remained. But I feel so bad for those who were let go. But what we are thinking of is that we'll be here for ABS-CBN up until we can build it back.
Yes, and ang daming platforms din no na try ng ABS-CBN just to remain in the service of the Filipino people. Yun ang ganda din paglaruan ng tagline, Jervis, in the service of the Filipino people, no? During the last 2 years of being in ABS-CBN, how challenging is it or was it to be in the service of the Filipino people?
Because a lot of layers. You have the pandemic happening, then you have the shutdown, and the shutdown really had so many implications.
Yes.
When we are sent to cover before the shutdown happened, there was easy access because people sort of looked up to ABS-CBN. ABS-CBN yan, sige, pag-coverin natin yan. We experienced discrimination on the first days. Bakit ka nagko-cover dito? Sarado na kayo, di ba? Mga ganong linya. Naalala ko, the first coverage that I've had after the shutdown was bigayan ng mga ng ayuda, ng cash aid. So habang mahabang mga pila ng mga nakapila for ayuda, and then I would walk past that line and then I would hear murmurs of people. Bakit nandito siya? Sarado na yan, di ba? We've had to endure that. That was really painful for me. But we've had to do what we've had to do. Di ba? We've had to serve the public even if they feel even some of them feel that we deserve to be shut down, or even some of them really felt even happy na wala na kami. But we still have to serve the people. That's something When you enter ABS-CBN, there would be a lot of seminars, like pre-employment seminars, to inculcate in you that all of the things that we do in this company is anchored there. That it should be on the service of the Filipino people. If it's not of service to the Filipino people, it might not be worth doing. It might not be worth pursuing.
Yes.
Things must be relevant to the Filipino people.
Ang ganda rin nung sinabi mo, Jervis, kasi parang dito mas lumalabas yung passion and commitment ng mga broadcast journalists amidst the pandemic and lalo pa itong shutdown na nangyari. Tapos, Jervis, I'm sure kasi you're also active online that you have read a lot of criticisms and comments on ABS-CBN that they deserve the shutdown and so on and so forth. What for you were the most hurtful words online? Sumagot ka ba sa mga bashers?
Noong umpisa, of course, kasi broadcast journalists are humans. May tipping point yung emosyon namin, no? But siguro through the years, we have learned how to manage trolls, and we are always being reminded to always take the high road. Huwag niyo napatulan because that's exactly what they want. They want engagement. And we would not want to give them that. Diba? So siguro when you say hurtful, ang pinakamasakit sa akin, alam mo, if it's my own relatives speaking against ABS-CBN. And I've had that. Hindi naman immediate, but siguro medyo distant ng konti. But I've really had relatives saying that we deserved it, saying na masaya sila nawalan ako ng network.
Yes. Pag mas malapit, no, mas masakit yung pinanggagalingan. Okay, next photo. Medyo napahaba tayo sa first photo. This is the next photo. Do you remember? I'm sure you remember this photo. Can you tell me what's
Yeah.
happening on this day? Paano mo nakilala si Mang Alberto?
Nagko-cover ako dito sa labas lang ng bahay namin yan, sa Teachers Village. Alam mo yung community pantry
Yes.
ni Patricia noon? I was going live one morning. Tapos, busy, syempre, before you go live, sobrang busy mo. May dumaan ng taong hindi magkakariton, parang pedicab na tawag dyan. Parang he seemed to be a lowly man, selling chicharon, selling, the food. Nag-abot siya sa akin ng isang plastic na may 3 pancit canton o 3 noodles. And I didn't know what to do. Parang nag-donate siya ng 3 noodles doon sa pantry. Una, hindi ko siya matrack. Hindi ko naman siya nakilala. Mabilis lang siya dumaan. Hindi siya nagpakilala and all. So, pinost ko yung story online, went viral until nalid ako doon sa anak niya. Nung nalid ako sa anak niya, we were able to raise some money for them because they're really needy people. But despite being poor, he still had this good heart to donate something at the pantry. So dito sa picture na to na nag-turn over kami sa kanya diyan ng mga bagong mga paninda. Tsaka eventually na bigyan ata namin siya ng bagong pedicab doon.
Ang ganda ng story kasi 'di ba this only proves that there are still a lot of good people. Kung ano man yung makayanan mo, yun yung binibigay. Pero ang curious ako dito, Jervis, is noong kasagsagan ng community pantry, 'di ba? Yun yung news na nagko-cover ka, 'di ba? As early as 3 a.m., 4 a.m., bukas na yung mga community pantry. Kasi kung ako yun, 'di ba, parang I'm such an emotional person. So grabe siguro yung iyak ko or grabe siguro yung pagkalugmok ko sa mga nangyayaring ito. How do you process emotions when you do broadcast journalism? How can you make sure that you still deliver the news as fair as you can, but you still care for these people?
Yeah, we will be trained. If you're a journalism student, you will be trained to put your emotions outside your story, but it doesn't mean that you have to lose your heart. I always have that belief that you have to put your heart in your storytelling, especially if you are telling stories about marginalized people, about poor communities, about those who are not heard. Yun yung lagi ako may puso ako eh. Like, when I do stories about the LGBT community, experiencing discrimination, when I feel like I'm covering poor people whose voices are not being heard. Kasi, broadcast journalism, television news is so saturated by the usual voices of the powerful. You always hear people from the government, experts, from the academe, yung mga taong nasa mataas na posisyon, di ba? Yung mga may kapangyarihan, laging sila yung nabibigyan ng boses sa media. So sa akin, siguro what makes me a little more different is that my heart is really to be lending our platform to those who are not heard. And kapag nagko-cover ako ng mga nabibiktima ng PJK o mga mahihirap na wala ng bahay or mga ganyang bags sa pantry na kailangan mong tumakbo at pakipag-unahan para makakain sa isang araw, it affects you, but hindi naman pwede na detached ka sa mga stories lagi, di ba? The more na may puso yung pagkikwento mo, the more na nuanced din yung pagtingin mo doon sa issue na you really have to capture the heart of this story. And ABS-CBN taught me that. That's how you affect people's opinion. That's how you affect your viewers. Na hindi ka lang nag-i-inform eh. Diba? You have to move people to action. You have to move people to do something, diba? Here, like si Mang Alberto, like it was our storytelling that moved people to donate more, diba? To help him. So mga ganung bagay, it doesn't come very often, but when it comes, it feels like siguro a pat on the back na maybe we're doing something right.
And finally, this is the final photo. Ito medyo nakakalito kasi I'm sure marami kang pictures na ganito. Alam mo ba kung saan to?
Pila ng... I'm not sure kung pila yan ng ayuda or pila ng...
mas recent.
Pantry. Pila to ng ng voters registration.
Yes. So, pila ito ng voters registration. How does this photo and how does this situation make you feel?
Somehow, it's actually mixed because when you talk to people there, you would hear a lot of things. No, on one hand, it makes you feel hopeful that a lot of young people are actually going out because they feel na we have to exercise our right of suffrage, we have to vote to make change. But on the other hand, hindi naman lahat ng mga pumipila doon ay gano'n ang pagtingin. Di ba? Madaming mga hinahakot. And we have to face these realities. No, we cannot escape the reality na madami sa kanila ay mga dinala ni kapitan ng isang barangay para bumoto kay certain congressman. So that's how I think we have to confront all this reality for us to shape our elections to be better.
Yes.
Yeah, there's part na hopeful, but there's also part na more realistic na
Yes.
we cannot just be idealists in the elections. We have to be realists as well.
At Jervis, ang lapit na ng May 2022, no? Parang, as we think about it, around 8 months pa. Pero parang pagkagising mo, April, kasi di ba magpa-filing na tayo, so parang papalapit na siya ng papalapit. What do you think are the roles of a broadcast journalist come May 2022? Gaano ka-importante ang isang mamamahayag sa papalapit na May 22 elections?
I think we play an important role because as you have seen in the 2016 elections, it was an election run by so much propaganda, so much disinformation, so much fake and false information circulating, affecting the results of the elections. And, as broadcast journalists, we have to be warriors of truth. Like, we have to put the truth out there. And that's how we feel na hindi talaga madali na ipaglaban yung katotohanan. We have to win people over believing what's true and what's right. In a time, in a place na disinformation is so rampant, false information spreads quicker than real news. So parang we have to be there. The frontliners for truth.
Yes.
And we have to make sure that people are coming to the May 2022 elections with an informed vote. So what better way to inform them? We have educational system, have the church, but of course the media plays a big role.
Yes. Last 2 questions. The first one ay, what would still be your dream interview or your dream news na i-deliver? Meron ka bang nasa isip na ito yung gusto kong makuhang news in the future?
Oh, madami actually. But top of mind is I want to cover the conclave or anything related to the Pope. Or if anything, I would like to interview Pope Francis. Not as a very religious person, but because doon nga nagsimula yung pangarap ko.
Yes.
Like watching the Pope, watching the election of a new Pope. So anything Vatican related would be one. I would also like to cover foreign conflict. Kasi more leaning talaga ako on conflict and disasters. So, mga international... of course, we do not wish for this to happen. Ayaw natin magkaroon ng mga giyera o mga pandaigdigan ng mga disasters like what happened in Thailand, before. Ayaw natin nun. But case lang na may mangyari ulit na mga ganon, I would want to cover that. Something more international in nature.
Ever this video or this podcast will be listened to by a high school student who wanted to become a broadcast journalist like you, what would you want to tell that young person?
Do not go here for fame or for money because you will never have that. Like, the intentions must be shaping public opinion, fighting for truth, and doing the news. Have a tough heart because it will not be easy, but I feel that it will be worth it. If you really have that heart for broadcast journalism, then go for it because it's really, really rewarding. I'm not saying it's everything's rewarding, everything's rosy, like this a perfect world, like every day I go home fulfilled. But it's not. It's far from that. Mas madaming panahon na umuwi ako na malungkot ako, umuwi ako na frustrated ako sa mga nangyayari sa labas. But at the end of it, hindi ko siya kayang iwan. Hindi ko kayang umalis sa industriya na to because this is where my heart is. I've built a home in
Yes.
ABS-CBN, all the people there. So, sa akin lang, if you really want it, then go for it.
Yes. Thank you, Jervis, for sharing your time and sharing your advocacy and your passion. And I do know that our listeners are inspired to get going and to hopefully fulfill their dreams. It might be a broadcast journalist like you or any dream that they would like to fulfill. Thank you, Jervis, and see you all
Thank you,
in our
Charles, for
next
having me.
episode.
So, yeah, salamat, salamat.
This is Speaking Of.